I can't believe it's finally here. We got the cast reveal about a couple of years ago, and we got the release date last year. Then the first teaser was a few months ago. It felt like time would never pass, but it is here. If you're new here, I have lots of Grishaverse videos. I read all the books in the Grishaverse, so this is going to be the point of view of a fan of the books. But I will keep this video spoiler free. I will have detailed analysis videos for each episode. I will compare them to the books. If you'd like to see those, don't forget to subscribe. My general view of the show is very positive. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think it's a show made for the fans. The cast is phenomenal. However, I'm not quite sure how it will be for people who haven't read the books. Things can get a bit confusing. We'll talk about all of those. But first, inevitably, whenever a new fantasy show is made, it's compared to Game of Thrones. I see tons of reviews comparing this to Game of Thrones. Is it the new Game of Thrones? Has Netflix found its Game of Thrones? Now, I understand that Game of Thrones was a huge success and it made it possible for big budget fantasy shows to be made. Before that, nobody really expected a high fantasy show to gain so much viewership, so it makes sense that everything gets compared to that, but I think it's worse to mislead the viewers. So let's first set some expectations for people who hasn't read the books. No, Shadow and Bone is not the next Game of Thrones. It's an important distinction because if you are a Game of Thrones fan, you might be disappointed. And if you're not a Game of Thrones fan, you might actually find something you'll like in this one. Let's talk about some differences. The core of Game of Thrones is political intrigue. It's about characters making questionable choices to survive an extremely hostile world. The highlights in Game of Thrones are when Tyrion makes a clever comment or when Tywin makes a cruel but smart strategic decision. You watch characters grow up and become hardened by the world, such as Daenerys or Arya. It's medieval inspired. Even the genres are different. A Song of Ice and Fire is an adult grimdark fantasy series, and it has a lot of graphic violence and explicit sex. On the other hand, Shadow and Bone is young adult fantasy. It's inspired by Imperial Russia. So imagine late 18th, early 19th century. There are guns and rifles. It's quite interesting to have those next to magic. The core of Shadow and Bone is character relationships. So some highlights you'll be thinking about are, is this extremely powerful kind of evil guy worthy of love? Or will these best friends finally realize how important they are for each other? Will these criminals who have been through a lot in their childhoods be able to overcome their wounds? Will the witch and the witch hunter be able to forgive each other? The themes are much more personal. It's much more about individual characters and their relationships than the world itself. There isn't nearly as much graphic violence. There are only a few graphic scenes and there is no significant nudity or swearing in the show. The main storyline is about a young cartographer in the army, Alina Starkov, finding out she has a unique magical power. The magic users in this world are called Grisha. She is from Ravka, which is inspired by Russia. It is surrounded by Fiarda in the north, inspired by Scandinavia, and Shuhan in the south, inspired by China. They have tense relationships with both of these nations, but the real problem is in the west. In the west of this country, there is a huge patch of darkness filled with monsters called the Shadowfold, which prevents them from reaching the sea to trade. However, with her newfound powers, Alina might help destroy the fold. Now, when the word gets out that such power might exist, everyone is suddenly trying to capture Alina. So our subplot is led by a group of criminals from another part of the world, Kerch, which is an island, and its capital is Ketterdam, which is basically a trade city full of merchants. It's Dutch inspired, as you might have guessed. Our group of thieves get an offer to capture and bring Alina Starkov. So they have their own plot line going. These characters are from Leigh Bardugo's Six of Crows series. However, Six of Crows takes place after the events of the whole Shadow and Bone trilogy, so this show really doesn't have any of the plot from Six of Crows, except for some Easter eggs and it has one small storyline directly from the books. If you want to catch up on the books before watching the shows, I have a couple of videos on the reading order. I recommend you check them out. I'll link my Grishaverse playlist in the description. The show doesn't do a great job explaining the magic system at all, so if you haven't read the books or if you need a refresher, I highly recommend you check out my video on Grisha magic system and orders. I also have a full chapter by chapter summary of the first book in case you'd like to know how everything takes place in the book. The show is quite faithful to Shadow and Bone itself. It does make some changes, but the core of every event remains the same. Most characters are very similar to their book counterparts. Some of them are greatly improved, so let's talk about them a bit. The main character, Alina, is, I think, more interesting in the show than in the books. In the books, she's quite bland and boring, but here Jessie May Lee does a great job with this character. They also made her half Shu, so she is a mixed-race character and already dealing with problems of belonging. Her relationships with other characters are improved. She shows much more agency. She is more active. Her friend Malyan Oretsev is greatly improved in the show. He is far more interesting. I cared about him so much more. Again, Archie Reno does a great job with this character. They trimmed down the controlling, demanding lines he had in the books. The fan favorite, the Darkling or General Kirigan in the show, has perfect casting with Ben Barnes. He has the menacing but charming aspects of the character down perfectly. I think they toned him down a little bit compared to the books. In the books, he's unironically called the Darkling, but in the show, it's something his enemies call him. I always found him Darkling a bit silly. It sounds like a little evil munchkin going like, I'm the Darkling. So I'm okay with the change. I think Genya doesn't get as much screen time as she does in the book. Her friendship with Alina felt a bit underdeveloped to me. Genya's arc is my favorite in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. It pains me to see it cut short. It's such a powerful story. I wish she got more screen time. Genya's relationship with David was also a bit underdeveloped, but the actors are so incredible that they really made it kind of work with just a couple of short scenes together. It's incredible what you can get when you have great actors. I thought Zoya was good, but I imagine Zoya to be more of a resting bitch face type of character, which Sujaya Dasgupta certainly isn't. I guess they're trying to make Zoya more likable. She's an important character, and I did kind of hate her in the books until I got the King of Scars, so I guess it makes sense. Bagra is great casting. She is like the strict Russian teacher type of character, but still her training was a bit weird. It was just a bunch of beatings. I think it was a good opportunity to give some exposition on the magic system, but they didn't do that. On the other side with the Crow characters, the main problem I have was the way they were introduced, of course. In the book, they're introduced during a job and you see them in action. In the show, it's more basic, definitely doesn't have the same effect. I'll talk about it more in the individual episode videos. I thought Jesper was a lot of fun. He had so much personality. Kit Young is fantastic. There are lots of cool gunslinging scenes. I had some problems with Kaz, even though Freddie Carter is also great casting. One problem is a lot about Kaz's character comes from the things he doesn't say. This is easy to do in a novel, but not so much on a TV show. He is a bit toned down in the ruthlessness and the scheming aspects of his character. Of course, this is a prequel to the book, so maybe leaving some room for character development. But the important thing is people don't like Kaz because he is nice and caring. They like him because of his virtuosity. He is incredibly good at what he does, and he has a unique attitude towards everything. I hope we see more of that next season. Inej is also fantastic casting. Again, there are some changes, and this is a prequel, but I really loved her character. But she's a bit reduced to the religious girl trope. In the books, she is religious too, but I always saw it as a strength. Here, it felt more superstitious to me. I hope they get a chance to shape it up a bit more in the future. My favorite moments were Nina and Matthias scenes, probably because they were exactly from the book. Man, do these actors have chemistry though. It's incredible. I absolutely loved their scenes together. I can't wait to see more, and it gives me hope too, because it means when they do stick to the books, they can actually do a pretty good job with these characters. I guess we talked about all the major characters. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone, but even if I did, we'll talk about all of them in the detailed analysis videos anyway. When it comes to the weaving these two storylines together, I thought they did an okay job. I never felt like crows contributed much to the story. I personally really enjoyed seeing them because I know the characters. Again, the actors are just so good. It's a pleasure to watch. And you go like, oh, that's so like Kaz. It's just so choppy though. I don't even know how they got to Ravka from Ketternam that quick. It's so far away. 8 episodes might not have been enough for this much stuff. Maybe if they had another 2, it would have been a bit better. Everything happens a bit too fast and rushed. The books are slow burn. I do love the relationship between Mal and Alina. I think that one's developed much better than the books. I'm guessing this show has already been renewed behind the scenes. It got quite remarkable critical success. At the time of this review, it has 91% on Rotten Tomatoes from 46 critics, which is as good as it gets, honestly. The production quality is high, the effects look as expected, not fantastic, but good. But the set design and costume design are phenomenal. The writing is really good. I don't think I'll have any TV jokes to make fun of in my analysis videos. There are a few jokes, but they were kind of fun. I can't believe that a TV show had a writer's room with decent writers. What? That was possible, so that's exciting. What I'm saying is this team definitely deserves to do another season. Netflix can be dumb and cancel shows randomly sometimes, but if they renewed Winx Saga, I'm sure they will renew this. They're probably waiting to see how long it's gonna stay in the top 10. I'm guessing it will definitely be renewed, but depending on how long it stays on top 10, we might get a budget increase, and that would be great. If you feel kind of empty and thinking to yourself like, now what? I tell you, the real fun begins now. I have tons of content planned for Grishaverse. Come join me while we wait for the second season. I also have lots of other bookish content, but that's it for this review, and I hope to see you on the next one.
I am commonplace. I am commonplace. I am